This week on the Journal Editorial Report, the White House scrambles to sell its Iran deal to a skeptical Congress as polls show the public support for the nuclear accord dropping. Plus, Hillary's past continues to dog her on the campaign trail amid new questions about Clinton Foundation donations and the slow-rolling release of her State Department emails. And Republicans move to strip Planned Parenthood's funding after a series of controversial videos become public. Will the war on women defense work this time around? Welcome to the Journal Editorial Report. I'm Paul Gigot. The Obama administration stepped up its efforts to sell its Iran nuclear deal to lawmakers this week as a new poll finds that a majority of Americans, 52%, think Congress should reject the agreement. President Obama hosted congressional Democrats Wednesday at the White House as other administration officials made the trip to Capitol Hill, where secret side agreements between Tehran and the IAEA continue to be a big concern.
Why can't we confirm or deny the content of these agreements in public? Why is this classified? Because it's not a sensitive U.S. government document. The Ayatollahs know what they agreed to.
Because we respect the process of the IAEA and we don't have their authorization to reveal what is a confidential agreement between them and another country.
So the Ayatollahs will know what they agreed to, but not the American people?
Well, no, not exactly, because we will share with you in the classified briefing what we understand the contents to be.
Joining the panel this week, Wall Street Journal columnist and deputy editor Dan Henninger and Global View columnist Bret Stephens. So, Bret, what have we learned in the last 2 weeks about this accord that we didn't know before?
A great deal. It's a 159-page deal, so there are a lot of details, and almost every detail is extremely interesting. We've learned about the difficulties of verifying the accord, the various mechanisms or non-mechanisms they have to use it. We've learned a lot about the enforceability of the accord and how the whole snapback, what a hoax, in a sense, the snapback mechanism.
Really unrealistic that anything will ever snap back once the sanctions.
Right. Unrealistic because Iran has its own snapback, which is it can go back to its nuclear program the moment we impose.
It can walk out and expel the inspectors.
That's exactly it. And then, of course, we've learned, as you heard in that video, that there are separate deals that are attached to the agreement but aren't formally part of the agreement. But those deals are essential to the verification mechanisms that we've depended on. Remember, President Obama says this deal is not based on trust, it's based on verification. But what we've said is this UN agency, the IAEA, is going to arrange something with the Iranians which we will not, the contents of which we will not understand. So we are, if not trusting the Iranians, we're trusting a UN agency to carry out a solid verification process.
Dan, this is very different. You and I were around when the Soviets and the U.S. negotiated arms accords, and those were between the United States and the Soviet Union. So if we had some suspicion about them cheating, we could go to them directly and bring it up. In this case, we have to go through the United Nations and the IAEA, and then if we think they're violating it, they have to go to the United Nations. So it could act as a kind of bodyguard for Iran, saying, well, let's not blow up the accord, let's take it slow. Well, the information is a little bit not clear cut, that sort of thing.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, you have to go through 4 layers of bureaucracy if you have an objection, and each layer has about 4 levels of appeal. So anyone who's been through these things understands that you can bog down any inquiry like that. The IAEA thing is very interesting. Before this was before the agreement was finalized, the IAEA had presented Iran with 12 sets of questions about the militarization of their nuclear program. They had answered 2.
These are their previous.
They had answered 2. They left 10 unanswered. Those were left unanswered when this thing was finalized. So that's still hanging out there. That's what I think what is in the side agreements.
Pretty clear we're not going to get an answer to that, at least not the American public.
Well, the administration is essentially letting it be known that it expects that Iran will never admit to its past weaponization work, the work they did to make a nuclear package explode. And that's vital, because if we don't know what they already know, then we really don't know how much time it may take them to go from having quantities of enriched uranium or plutonium to actually building a bomb.
Let's talk about public opinion on the Democrats, Dan, because they hold the key to the Democrats do, I think, to approving this. President only needs 1/3 of the House or the Senate to be able to sustain a veto of a vote of a resolution of disapproval. But it's interesting. Why hasn't the public swung behind this accord? Usually the American people do when you have a president who makes a big foreign policy deal like this.
All right, the clock is ticking. 60 days the Senate has. There are at least 4 groups opposing the accord, which are going to spend upwards of $40 million on television ads to present information. Okay. Other groups like MoveOn.org, which support it, are spending less money. But these ads seem to suggest that once people find out more detail about the agreement, they turn against it. There's been several exercises showing that to be the case. And it's kind of like Obamacare. This is something that started out with a great deal of enthusiasm, and then the support falls out beneath it. And I think that's going to affect Democrats thinking about whether they want to.
I also think that Americans no longer trust the president on foreign policy. He said Al-Qaeda's on a path to defeat. Clearly, it wasn't. He said we got all the chemical weapons out of Syria. It turns out that we did not. So the president has a record of making claims about his foreign policy which prove false.
But will it be enough to turn enough Democrats against it, Brett?
I think it may be enough to get 10 Democrats, 11 Democrats, whether you get over that 67 Senate vote hump, I doubt. That being said, if you get a substantial number of Democrats, it sets the predicate for the next president to say this is a deal that Americans reject on a bipartisan basis.
White House has a full court press to get Democrats to speak out publicly in favor. So far, few have.
They don't want the humiliation of a majority, bipartisan majority, to vote against this. When we come back, Hillary Clinton's past is catching up to her on the campaign trail, despite her best efforts to change to policy. We'll have the latest on Clinton Foundation dealings and State Department stonewalling next.